Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
A lot of times there are things that set us off, put us in a certain state of mind. I don't know if that's an accurate description for a trigger, but that's how I verbalize it. And a lot of times we'll think that a trigger is a bad thing. Like you go back to a certain situation and it's challenging. Apparently, triggers can be a good thing. I didn't know. He's going to talk about that and so much more. He's a transformational coach for men. I will say that we all got triggers, doesn't matter who you are, man or woman. And he's back with us as our professional of the year. Joshua Long is on the program. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here.
Same. I always learn so much from you, and I am, because of you, thank you, the smartest man in the room many times because I share what we talk about, and people just think I'm, brilliant. So triggers is something that connects to something in your past. Yeah. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it well. I think it ignites that false self that we've talked in past episodes. So it creates a reaction, which is coming from subconscious belief system from a trauma in the past, right? So it ignites that ego to get into protection mode.
Okay. And they're there to support us. Is it a good thing to have a trigger?
It's good. It's good and bad. So like you said, most people look at a trigger like it's horrible. It's horrible. I would say when you're living unconsciously before you're kind of in your awareness, triggers are negative because they actually will just run your life. So that's really kind of that reactivity that trigger all things, like small things, big things. They will put you in a state of reactivity, which is living subconsciously, which is what we, today people say, you're not woke, you're living subconsciously. So in that sense, where you're not aware and they're just controlling your life, it's fine, or it's not good. And the reason it's hard for us to see that is because of that pride that we've spoke in past episodes. That pride rationalizes the reactivity. But all of that is ego. The pride is the ego. The reaction is the ego. The reaction being the response to kind of keep you from feeling those negative emotions that are attached to that past trauma that you mentioned. So when you're in that state of not being on a healing journey, and not woke, definitely a negative thing. But once you cross over into the consciously, I'm working on myself, I want to be the best version of myself, triggers are actually the best thing for you because they're literally the opportunities, what I call the gateways of your healing. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, essentially, if you're on the healing journey, when the trigger presents itself, you realize it, and right away you minimize it, you squash it. Oh, yep, there it is again. I know why it's doing that, because of this situation in my past. You know what would probably be impactful? Share some triggers, go hypothetical. What do you think?
Well, kind of perfect example, like you were saying, before we got on here, you were saying how you went to the DMV. There is triggers all day at the DMV. And I was actually going to say it when you were telling me, but I was like, no, let me hold this for the show because I'm sure it will come up. But I always, especially or even in the grocery store, standing in simple line to check out, you see, and I get it. There's a realistic aspect that's frustrating when Walmart has 20 lanes and there's only 3 open. I get it, but that's out of our control. But in that instance, when the lines are slow or backed up, you get triggered. So most of the time you'll start feeling like anxiousness. And this is where you start noticing it in your body. You'll first notice what's the first sign when I'm triggered? But that opportunity of feeling anxious is an opportunity to ask yourself, what's actually going on right now? Most times something like that, it's just feeling like you're out of control, but it's an opportunity to practice patience, to stand in presence, because you're only anxious because you're trying to get to the future, which is the ego.
Hmm.
And there's that unmet need.
Now we're using the line, whether it's a DMV,
Yeah.
Walmart, whatever it is. Now, just a minimal example. However, it can go to more serious things. For example, I'm rolling hypothetical here. You're online. Again, there's 20 registers. The self-checkout, it's not working. And they have 3 open. And you're like, really? No, I'm here. I took my time. I'm spending money here. You get triggered potentially because you feel that you're disrespected. Don't
Mhm.
they know that I'm here spending money in your store? You can't get more. And that
Mhm.
could, again, hypothetical, that could go back to your past where you were in a situation or a few where you felt disrespected. And that could be, you got triggered because you felt disrespected. Does that
Mhm.
sound like it could be a situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody's trigger can go back to something else, um, like feeling disrespected or not feeling seen, not feeling,
Hmm.
everybody's connection can vary. But I think that's a great example, and then ask yourself in that moment, oh, wait, when's the first time that I feel like someone was really disrespected? The first memory I have when I felt really disrespected and not considered, because even though
Hmm.
it doesn't look the same, emotions live under so many different behaviors in scenarios it can trigger. So it's not like it
Sure.
has to match specifically to what the
Right.
trauma, right?
Yeah, just to be clear, we're not talking about it was 5 years ago. I was at Target and they did the same
Exactly.
thing. No, it's not that. It's a could be, but it's not. We're talking
Uh-huh.
about something, a deeper situation within your life, potentially going back to your childhood where you weren't seen or you felt disrespected or you weren't being heard, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
another common one is like relationships. I think a lot of times we hear like trust issues is a big one in relationships. And they always blame the last ex, you know. It was this person. This person did this. Every ex has always cheated on me. It's like, no, all the trust was an issue. Maybe it strengthened the fear, but it started before those exes. Uh,
Hmm.
so that's why I always say if you're really getting curious and on the journey, it's very crucial to ask yourself, what's the first memory I can go back to?
So,
Because a lot of
question on
people
that.
go back a year, 2 years.
I've done that, but it was timeline therapy through hypnotherapy.
Hmm.
And I was able to identify the timeline regression was for 5 negative emotions. So we went back the first time you felt sad, the first time you felt angry, etc. Is it possible to think back? You're standing in line at Walmart, you got triggered. Is it possible to think back to the first time and pull that out of, let's say, your childhood just like that?
I think it gets easier in time
Okay.
because I think as you're starting this healing journey, you're shedding. Like we mentioned, there's the pride you got to get through, and then there's the shame of accepting that maybe I'm wrong in this situation.
Hmm.
Um, so I think as you go through it, that pride and shame of that ego kind of just crumbles, and then you can kind of go back to anything. Because I notice in like now when I do it, I go back and I feel like sometimes I'm picking things that aren't even a part of it, but I'm picking, looking and trying to find anything that it could be. And then you just run through that process of all of them. And even if it helps, and I mean, you'll know when it like shifts you, you're like, ah, okay, now I feel. And then your perspective, once you are going back, you may like change it, may change what the trigger is. Maybe it is disrespect. Maybe it is I mean, societal things, because a lot of times when in those things, it's like we talk about unemployment, then you start blaming people. And it's like, okay, well, now why am I blaming people?
Hmm.
So you start, it gets easier to go back further. Yeah, it can be challenging at first.
Do you think almost like a mind exercise? Like once you use your, let's say you haven't solved deep problems before in a long time. And
Mhm.
then now you're part of your job. They presented you with something, and now you're just like, all right, let me think. Oh, no, it's coming. Takes a little, like it's an exercise, like a muscle, like you haven't
Mhm.
used in a while. Is it potentially like that where the the first time you felt something comes back faster if you start doing that on a somewhat regular
Yeah.
basis?
I would say, I mean, just when you said that, and I don't know if this is factual, this is just kind of what came to me, but I could almost see the exercises like where you're shown a picture and there's like 20 objects. And then like, okay, you go to another screen and another screen to kind of try to get you to forget and distract your mind. But then you go back to that picture and say, put all those 20 objects back to where you saw them in the first picture.
Mm.
So I could see that kind of exercise helping pull. It's a memory thing, pulling in memories because all the memories are stored. It's just gaining that access to it, which is why, like you said, hypnotherapy, we use guided meditation and hypnotherapy a lot to get into those subconscious thoughts and beliefs because a lot of people struggle to do it in their mind.
Yeah. And I think that's why it worked for me with hypnotherapy because it helped. It was almost like the snowplow cleared the
Mhm.
road for me to go
Yeah.
back easier without having to try to navigate over stuff and things get in the way. I once, way back, was connected to somebody who, if you said the word pornography, porn, it would trigger them.
Mhm.
And like, what was the deal with that? Because they were with somebody in their past who would just, I guess they were addicted to it and ignored them. And that was like a major trigger. That just came back to me. I'm just thinking about triggers.
Yeah.
Could be anything, right?
So much. I mean, it's once you really get curious about everything in your life, um, yeah, you get triggered a lot and you realize there's a lot of parts to it. So a lot of times if you can't get there through memory, something that I do with like my clients is I call it parts work. And parts are like parts of the adolescent, things that have been behaviors that have been created to avoid those negative emotions. So the way we go back into that is so like when you're standing in line, you can even kind of do just a body check, what I call like a body scan, and just ask yourself, where am I feeling this in my body?
Hmm.
Kind of just get present, because some people get triggered and they get short of breath. Some people get triggered and their heart starts racing. Some people get triggered and they get a knot in their stomach. Most of the time, emotions live in our torso. So it's going to be in your torso mainly, but don't avoid anything. Go with it. And then once you feel something that's off in your body, sit with that, bring your attention to it, and ask yourself, like, what is this I'm feeling? And so you kind of create a visual with an emotional. So you go into your subconscious like, oh, I just feel like I have like a knot in my gut. Ask yourself, okay, well, how big is that knot? Is it like a knot in a rope? Is it just a knot like in yarn? Like, what is it? And then ask yourself, like, what do I need to undo that knot? And when you ask yourself, what do I need? That's going to tell you what the unmet need was, which will then point you back to the feeling. So it's a different way of getting to it.
Sure, sure. Well, there's some that say you should give it a name, a feeling or
Yeah.
emotion, a color, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Where it shows up in your body when you get triggered, does it make a difference? Does it tell you anything?
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't say it makes a difference. I mean, I do notice like common placement with motions. Like usually if it's around like relationships or love of some kind, it's usually like in the heart. Um,
Yeah.
Anxiety can be in the chest, or in the stomach.
Okay.
Stomach
Right.
is kind of like a big, like just fear, like in your stomach. If it comes to like speaking, a lot of times they'll feel like a knot like in their throat, which throat chakra, it's usually a block there. So they'll feel like, I can't swallow or something. So there's like, I would say there's a consistency depending on the situation, but no, nothing specific.
We we said at the very beginning today that there can be a plus side to a trigger. What would that be?
Yeah, so the plus side is really like couple things. One, it's showing you what's in your shadow. So shadow being the ego, like shadow self, false self. So when you get triggered, it's showing you like something, a gateway of where you need to heal. And besides that, like we talked about boundaries last week, a lot of people, when they do start setting boundaries, they're just like, I don't even, one, they probably just don't know who they truly are. So they're like, oh, like, I don't know what my boundaries are. So triggers are actually also a great way for you to learn who you are. So if a friend does something to you and it triggers you, you're now learning your boundaries. So you can learn your boundaries through triggers. So it's not that it's always your fault when you're triggered. You can, you definitely should check in with yourself, but it also shows you. So say someone just raises their voice to you, like a friend raises their voice a certain way, or makes like a joke, criticizes you through humor. If it triggers you and you can be honest with yourself, you can say, oh, I know I need to set a boundary with that friend now. So you can learn your boundaries and say, hey, I know you don't mean any harm by this. I know we're good friends. But it just makes me feel sad about myself when you make jokes like that. So you can learn your own boundaries through triggers also.
Hmm. It's very clear. Once you
Huh.
can identify what the trigger is, but many of us, if we haven't done the work or if we don't understand it, we just because it's
Mhm.
basically emotion, you go off in a crazy area. I don't mean that in a negative way. You're just like you're dealing with anxiety, stress, uh, anger, all of that. So you're not processing, you're not using your trigger as a positive. You're using it just riding the wave of the negativity, right?
Mhm. And I love that you said anxiety and stress, because anxiety and stress, that's if you go into like spiritual world, like all these things that we're just giving medication to. It's just numbing those like transponders in our minds. It's not
Sure.
actually solving any problems, which is why people usually have to stay on them forever. But when
Band-aid.
you go down this journey, you realize stress and anxiety is just unmet needs, and a desire and an expectation of the future. And when you can really come into present and meet those needs for yourself, which is honoring that inner child that we've spoke about in the past,
Hmm.
then your anxiety and stress diminishes or lowers.
I want to go right there. Unmet needs. Now, it's my understanding stress and anxiety can come from the past and the future. So, the future, anxiety, looking, anticipating what could happen. Usually it never materializes anyway, but you worry about it. Stress can come from the past. That happened to me, and I think it's happening again, so I'm stressing out. But what you just said, how is that, how is that connected?
And what elaborate? How's what connected exactly?
In in terms of how it can support you and your needs? What would your needs be in a situation like that where you're feeling stress and anxiety? What needs aren't being met?
So that's where you go back to the inner child. So the ego's there to kind of like protect that inner child. So it's never actually allowing you to see what your true self needs, that inner child, which is where most traumas are coming from. So like you said, like the disrespect, like in line, like I'm feeling stressed out, and most like say I'm out of control. I'm feeling disrespected. Most of the time, when that unmet need is your inner child, at some point when you go back to that first memory, is going to trace back to that feeling of feeling disrespected or not feeling seen by your parents or whatever it might be. And then that's where you have to honor the need. So
Hmm.
the inner child is feeling disrespected from the memory it has, say, we'll just say from parents. And it's our job stepping into our adult to go back and give that to ourselves. So we're reparenting that inner child. So we go back, and it's almost like a triple dialogue between who you truly are, your authentic adult self, letting your ego know, thank you for keeping the child safe. You've done what you needed to do, because the ego is a good thing. It serves a good purpose, but
Sure.
it doesn't know that we're no longer there. It thinks we're there. The trigger thinks that it's present.
That's about, you know what? I'm glad you said that because that's so impactful that when you get triggered, your subconscious thinks it's the situation that happened, could have been 3 decades ago, whatever it might be. It doesn't know time and space. So it's thinking is that was back then. So I'm going to trigger him or her right now. Got it. It's the same situation, but it's not.
Right. And like we said, it's not even physically the same situation, but the emotion and the unmet need is the same. So emotion, when you go back to that, now you're telling the child, like, and a lot of times you have to build that trust with that child because they don't really know you. And that's where that meditation and inner child work, introducing yourself, letting them know I'm the adult version of you. Like, what do you need from me? And most of the time, like, you don't try to figure it out. It's all subconscious work. So it's hard to kind of speak on, but the inner child might say, I just want to go out and play. I want to go play on recess. Or I just really want a new doll, whatever it might be. And then you, as the adult version of yourself, honor that. And through that visual in your mind, you give the child, say, here, I got you. I love you. You're good enough. And so you're building that bridge between your inner child and your adult and kind of eliminating, or well, we won't say eliminating, but allowing the ego to rest.
Everything you're saying through hypnotherapy is what I did. I confronted my younger self almost as if I was watching a movie of my childhood. And there I am, walking around the playground, getting bullied and all of that. And as an adult, confronted my younger self and said, I got you. I will never leave you. I will always take care of you. I mean, yeah, I was like,
right, exactly.
But you need to do it. It has to get done.
Yeah.
It's you because you've never been addressed. And it goes back to the fundamentals that we always hear, these cliches. Nobody can love you better than you. You have to love yourself before you can love others. Yeah. Because nobody gave us the love that we really typically, there's some isolated cases, but and I would love you to address that. Nobody's really loved us the way 100%, the way we need what we need. Because we're us, even as a child. So there's probably little things in all of us that need to be addressed along the way. And there's probably triggers that we don't even know the triggers are coming up.
And I think it's crucial to also understand that like we place so much, because parents are usually a lot of the traumas, it's people closest to you, but it's also,
and we don't, by the way, we're not throwing parents under the bus.
No, and that's exactly what I was about to say.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. Because a lot of people think that when you do talk about parents, or when they talk about their parents, that they can't. So it does take me a lot of time to get people to actually open up because their pride wants to always say they did the best they can. And that's a true statement. Because we got to understand, like, here we are, like for myself, 33 years old, I'm restructuring and rewiring my whole life. But we forget that before parents were parents, whoever my mom, before she was mom, she was Tara, and Tara also had a childhood. And Tara also showed up in her subconscious and was triggered by maybe me as her child.
Yep.
And it wasn't ever me that was the problem. And it's never mom's fault because she is doing what she thinks. It is our responsibility to heal, but it's not always like that, and so there's no blame on anybody.
No. And every parent does the best they can with what they have. What do they have? Their childhood leading up to it. And, great point you bring up. You could be a parent and your child triggers you, but all they're doing is triggering the child in you.
Right.
And now you're reacting to it, and sometimes not in a favorable way. And you don't realize and once I started doing the healing work, I saw the connections between how I parent even my son and what I did, back in the day, how I reacted to things he did. A lot of it came from my childhood. And I think we just repeat things. So what we're comfortable with, how your father treated you, that might be the way you treat your son.
Mhm.
because you got triggered. We're out of time. I'm going to get triggered.
Right.
I'm going to trigger. The light's going to blink over here. I mean, such good stuff that you bring, and this is the stuff that is the baseline for all of us in the way we act. Josh, how do we find you?
Yeah, you can find me at www.joshualongcoaching.com, JOSHUALONG coaching.com, or you can find me on all social media platforms at Coach Joshua Long, or just shoot me a email at transformation@joshualongcoaching.com.
Or you can find him online at Walmart freaking out.
Yeah, I'll be there screaming.
You know what's so funny is like I think of those I'm the same way. And then you think, why am I getting, PO'd? Like I'm not in a rush. I got plenty of time. Once you start sitting with it, it's like, we're good. Take your time. Cut me.
You don't need a pill to not be stressed. I can just relax and be present.
Exactly. All right. Great talking to you. We'll catch up next time.
Pleasure.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.